General Skywalker, come in.
We read you, Rex? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Standing by. We were worried. You were off the scopes there for a moment.
A moment? We've been gone more than a moment, Rex.
Warthog, protect the gunships. I will take out the fighter.
Copy that, Commander. Have fun down there. Man down! Man down! General Kenobi, don't land! The zone is hot!
There's nowhere else to go! Move it, trooper! Come on, double time!
This point forward, we are entering uncharted territory.
Jedi, I have been waiting for you.
I am no Jedi.
Come on then, let's go! Go, go, go!
Hello and welcome to Clone Corner, a podcast about Star Wars: The Clone Wars, currently streaming on Disney+. I'm Travis Fishburne.
I'm Alex Brunel.
And this week we'll be covering Season 7, Episode 2, A Distant Echo. And things, keep continuing for the Bad Batch.
Yeah. So, I'll start off by just saying I like this episode quite a bit more than the preceding episode. Not that I didn't like, but
I agree, yeah.
D. Bradley Baker, again, does a lot of the heavy lifting in the episode and does a great job. I was glad to have Anakin in there and bring that into there a little bit. Yeah,
that was something I wasn't expecting. I was expecting a lot of clones throughout this entire arc, which we are getting, but I definitely thought it was going to be exclusively clones, so...
Yeah, I thought so too. But, I mean, I don't know how we're organizing this, so I'm just talking about random stuff as it occurs to me. But, like, probably my favorite part of the episode was the scene between Anakin and Padme and Rex and Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a really fun scene. Yeah,
loved that. I thought that was really nice. And again, like, blanket disclaimer with me. In as much as I think it is in this instance, in this scenario of storytelling.
Yeah, I like it that they're injecting a lot of character humor in with these characters in this situation that feels more original trilogy and more fitting to the universe than they were able to do with the prequels.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, I like this like suggestion that Rex kind of like almost begrudgingly keeps covering for Anakin as he just like skirts away to talk to Padme before they take off for the next battle or whatever.
Yeah.
And that Obi-Wan totally knows.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
It's just like, dude, just like stop hiding in the literal like gun closet about this.
Yeah, but I guess he needs the deniability. Obi-Wan does.
Right. This is true. What are your main takeaways from this episode?
I like that. The animation really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I agreed.
Like more so than even in the previous episode. I like seeing all of the different clones with the different armor. I'm always like a big sucker for armored characters, so I'm always excited to see what kind of new trooper is in every movie. And so I like that all of the Bad Batch clones have their customized armor. I like Tech's helmet the best. I think it's interesting that Hunter's helmet looks almost just like a Stormtrooper helmet, but painted differently.
Yeah. I agree with that. I like those designs a lot. Speaking of designs in this episode, have we those like skinny battle droids that have we seen those before?
Yeah, as far as I know, they're brand new battle droids for the Techno Union.
Yeah, I liked those a lot.
Yeah, even though they sounded exactly like the B-1 battle droids.
Right. Like obviously it's like the same thing in like a weird form factor, but I like the weird form factor. I think it's a much more interesting looking thing than the traditional battle droids. And I liked the reintroduction of the Techno Union.
Yeah, I like Wat Tambor.
Yeah, I like the character design on that guy very much.
Yeah, I've always been very intrigued by him. My only complaint is that he didn't have to adjust the dial when his voice goes out of whack like it does in Attack of the Clones.
The Techno Union Army Is at your disposal, Count.
Yes, that is a good moment in that movie. But yeah, I like his reappearance. I like that it's continuing to do that, like with the spider guy. I can never remember anybody's name.
Trench.
Trench, yeah. Just bringing back these kinds of characters and peppering them in, and just minor. I have minor nitpicks. I just want to say both in this episode with the planet of Skeko Minor and the previous episode with Anaxis.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those planets just sound like other words, and I thought they, like, the first time I watched Bad Batch, I thought they were talking about an axis, like a singular axis within a field. And it took me a long time to piece together that was the name of a planet. And then Skeko Minor just sounds like Scarecrow. It just sounds like Scarecrow Minor. That's nitpicks. But both of those things kept tripping me up because I kept wondering what the hell they were talking about.
Yeah, it's tough to come up with new planet names all the time. I know, and it's even tougher because they threw away many decades of world building and planet names. So now everything is. I mean, but that was still part of that era of storytelling, even, I guess. But yeah, I mean, even when this series was airing, that became an issue early on when they first introduced the planet of Mandalore and the Mandalorians. There was I remember this. There was a series of novels by Karen Travis about the Mandalorians and the Mandalorian culture, and she was very much like she had created this off-screen culture for the Mandalorians and kind of the clones in a similar way that like Ronald D. Moore did with the Klingons in The Next Generation. Like she owned that, and when like George Lucas and Dave Filoni were like, but that's officially not how Mandalore is, and this is how it is. It became right. I remember that was like the first issue of not all of these canons line up in that way, and then Disney made it official later. Like just forget it.
Yeah, it was pretty messy. Mm-hmm. It was pretty messy. Yeah, I kind of liked the messiness. So maybe not take anything too seriously. Mm-hmm. But then again, I like what Disney's been doing with the continuity in general too. But just, I mean, this is a divergence. But like, just like, I guess my biggest gripe would be like making up Batu for Galaxy's Edge, and then now all of a sudden Batu is like a major location throughout time in Star Wars.
In the books and video games, it's like, all right, let's make sure that we're mentioning this everywhere we can.
Right. Let's like make sure to legitimize this thing as hard as we possibly can. Like there was even like a 4-issue comic series that was like about that trading post where like all of our favorite characters like would flit in and out of these stories throughout the years, and it's like, okay, like sure.
You didn't have to do that to legitimize this place,
Yeah. We're talking about Clone Wars. I have a lot of Star Wars thoughts, but we're talking about Clone Wars.
Oh yeah, that's okay. That's what this show's about.
What else in this episode? I liked the planet in Skeko Minor, the humanoid, the indigenous people of the planet on the flying lizards. I liked the design of that a lot. I liked the design of those characters a lot. The scene was pretty sci-fi tropey, where it's like, misunderstanding, hostility, and it's like, no, we just want to do this thing and leave you for the better. And they're like, okay, we'll help you for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and they don't have the translator droids, so you see like in real time, tech translating it. Yeah,
that was interesting. I liked that. That was a new thing we hadn't seen before. You're right, it usually is a droid.
Yeah, that was my first thought. I'm like, they didn't bring C-3PO for this one. That's usually is so excited to do this.
Because that's the only thing that he does that he's built to do. I like that. I like that aspect a bunch. Thought that was neat. The Echo in the very end of the episode is like, that's a very sad and, it's just a deeply sad sight if you're invested in that.
It's pretty creepy too.
Yeah. So I always like when this show verges into like the creepier kind of aesthetics that it does do from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah, and
does
the
some creepy
whole
design choices from time to time.
yeah, and the design of the techno union base, and especially where they were keeping Echo there, that whole chamber, it
Yeah.
like felt very like Fritz Lang Metropolis.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
And that's something I know like they do throughout this series. Like Dave Filoni and George Lucas are like always paying homages to like older cinema in one way or another. There are a few
Yeah.
episodes where they're just like, let's straight up, like the whole Ahsoka arc when she ends up leaving the Order. All of the episodes and the titles and the episodes themselves are loosely based off of Alfred Hitchcock movies.
Huh. I guess I never put that together. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
The Jedi Who Knew Too Much, The Wrong Jedi, To Catch a
Oh,
Jedi.
right. I definitely picked up on the Jedi Who Knew Too Much. I guess. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, I mean, I could totally see echoes of Metropolis and the design of the Techno Union stuff.
Yeah.
I was considering going back and like watching the story reel version to see what the design was like, just because like these are kind of the most visually impressive episodes of Clone Wars. I was interested in seeing like what it looked like before they put any money into rendering any of it
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
and lighting any of it. Like there is some really dramatic lighting work going on that is kind of previously atypical of the show that I thought was really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the way that they're making all of the lighting and the texturing work. It's very nice.
Yeah. Do we know? I mean, I guess this must take place pretty close. Like, do we know when this takes place exactly?
I mean, you can look at Padme and kind of look at her bump and think like, she might be like 3 or 4 months pregnant at this point.
Yeah.
Because she's kind of showing, and they can't make her show too much because in Revenge of the Sith is the first time that Anakin knows. So they can't make it too obvious.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and she's like ready to pop.
Yeah.
Well, like how in what like does Revenge of the Sith take place over the course of like a few days, a week? I can't even remember now.
Yeah, I would say like a week.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's always been an interesting thing about the movies, is trying to figure that out. Because and when you're like a child watching Empire Strikes Back, you never think like, oh, this is taking place over the course of days or weeks.
Right.
Because it
You just watch the movie.
It's all real time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I think I thought about that a bit when I was rewatching all the movies before Rise of Skywalker came out. But I don't have a great idea of the time periods that these movies take place over, I guess. Except for the ones that very blatantly take place within the course of like a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
Like A New Hope is just like that movie takes place in the course of like 48 hours maybe.
Mm-hmm. And The Force Awakens.
Yeah, Force Awakens.
And then Last
For
Jedi
sure.
being the first movie to like literally pick up seconds after the previous one ended.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we want to diverge a little bit more from Clone Wars, we could talk about the revelation out of the Star Wars, the Rise of Skywalker novelization.
We can. It's frustrating to me that like the novelization is not officially out yet, and yet
Right, and-
like all this news is like coming out and all these headlines, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I would have rather just kind of found out these things myself, but you just can't
Are
do
you
that
planning on
anymore.
reading the book?
Yeah, I have read all of the novelizations for the books
Oh,
because I find them interesting.
Yeah.
The Last Jedi novelization is really good, and it's got a few cut scenes. The moment that Luke reaches out and Leia wakes up and he like uses the Force for the first time in forever,
Yeah.
you can't go into this in the movie, but in the book, he like that's the turning point. He changes his mind, like everything comes rushing back
interesting.
to him, and he's like Rey was right. Like, I need to get involved. Like, we need to go do this. And he is literally on his way to go get her and tell her like she was right. And that's when he walks in on her and Kylo and then like freaks out.
Interesting.
And I'm like,
yeah, that's
whoa.
very interesting. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, I wish that was more conveyed in the movie, but
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Have Luke verbalizing the whole way like, she was right.
Right. Right. Yeah, or just like his eyes snap open and just go, Ray was right.
Yeah.
That would be bad. Yeah, that'd be bad.
Tell your sister you were right.
And as a supporter of The Last Jedi, I don't want to suggest things that would make it a worse movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess my reaction to the, I guess we could not talk about the Rise of Skywalker novelization stuff in specifics since it's not out yet, even though it's been all over the headlines. But I guess my reaction is more just like, yeah, that's the only thing that makes sense, and it's just as, it's the only reason that it feels at all dumb is because like literally any explanation would have felt dumb once it was set up with no explanation to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
You
mean,
know?
the whole movie, a lot of the things that like came out in it, I'm just like, all right, okay, well, people have like, I've heard every angle that whatever mystery could be. So at this point, I feel like I've heard it all. And yet
Right.
it just like none of the avenues they approached felt natural.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about, we didn't get to talk about in our Rise of Skywalker review, was the Colin Trevorrow script. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah, I read highlights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I liked a lot of what I read in the article that I read. I was like, oh, I mean, there's stuff that didn't make sense, but I'm like, oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's like really, really interesting. And I also don't want to praise Colin Trevorrow because like I'm not a huge fan, but like those seem to be better considered ideas than what we got, man.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that it's a sequel to both movies that came before it. And it just really acknowledges The Last Jedi and
built on it in an interesting way that we were not allowed. Yeah, that was frustrating to read that the original idea was better, I guess. But you know, that's probably it's almost always the way.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean I feel like Rise of Skywalker was like the make or break thing. Like after, you know, the troubles with Solo and like, I mean, like I guess Mandalorian did a lot to cement positive, like a general positive response to Star Wars. And it's really great that they did The Mandalorian around the same time as Rise of Skywalker to kind of balance out people's disappointment in Rise of Skywalker. Because, like, I know many people who were disappointed by Rise of Skywalker, and I know very few people who were disappointed by The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody that I've heard of.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who just, like, wanted it to be, like, one long story and wasn't down with the episodic nature of it, which, like, I can see, but, like, you know, I don't agree with. But it would have been nice if Disney would have stuck to storytelling over the feelies, I guess.
Yeah.
And over the nostalgia bass.
But the ironic thing is that's like what The Mandalorian did as well. But it just did it
I know.
in a way that wasn't, it just felt natural to the world and not placating to things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously so much of it is fan service. Like, I wanted to really strongly dislike the child when the child first appeared. Because my first thought was like, come on. Like, really? We've never seen this before. We've never seen anything close to this before. And I know that for George, this was kind of a big deal for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And here it is. And so, like, my initial reaction was, for all of, like, 30 seconds, mind you, was very strongly like, oh, great, so this is what we get now. And then, like, it just worked on my brain, and like it's because it's scientifically engineered to just like break down your barriers of what you can deal with. I think it's like so engineered to be so damn cute that you're just like biologically you cannot resist Baby Yoda. I think it somehow manages to tap into that, and then I was on board. But yeah, because it backs it up with like a strong and interesting character. It backs it up with the storytelling at the same time.
Yeah, it does.
Which Rise of Skywalker did I get too much of or not enough of, or like I still don't even know. I have to watch the movie another couple times.
Yeah, I mean that's how I feel. That's how I feel about like every new movie. The first time I saw The Force Awakens, I didn't know what I felt about it. I watched it and I was like, I'm very overwhelmed and I don't know what I just saw how I feel about it. And it wasn't until I watched it again that I actually enjoyed it.
Interesting. Yeah, the first time out for me on Force Awakens, I kind of enjoyed it a lot more than I did, or that I thought I would. Like I enjoyed it against my better expectations and judgment, I think. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's been a very tumultuous time to be a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess literally any period where there's content coming out is a tumultuous period for a Star Wars fan.
It's so weird.
Like literally anything that upsets our already established notions of what we could be delivered that says Star Wars on it is just like such a traumatic event potentially.
Yeah, that is interesting because whenever it's you're in a period of no content except for like maybe some comics and books, and then you're like in this build up anticipation period, like everyone's very excited and all on the same page. It was like that back in '99 before The Phantom Menace came out.
I've been waiting 15 years since Return of the Jedi came out to see the prequel.
There's no way it's going to be a disappointment.
Are there any of you that think this is going to be a lousy movie?
And then that bubble happened.
Thumbs way down.
You didn't like it?
No, I think I deserve a public apology from George Lucas.
Yeah, and then even though we kept getting those stories, it was really interesting to watch the fan culture of Star Wars evolve into one that fully embraced the prequels in a way that if you told me that would happen in 2005, I would have never believed you.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, I have, probably a lot of thoughts on that. But
yeah, it's interesting because
it's a wild thing.
Yeah, for me, I've always been a fan of the prequels, but I heard somebody like they keep making this point, like now that there are new movies and stuff, there's less pressure on the prequels, so they accept it more. And to me,
that's an interesting idea.
However, like for me, because there's new content out now, I'm like, I don't know. I think I appreciated the prequels when it was like, this is all you get. So I'm appreciating what I have. But now that there is more content, I'm like, I'm more critical of them because I'm like, it's part of the other, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's a lot to be said for that, but it's also like, even before the sequel trilogy started coming out, there's like this legion of like, because I mean, Lucas would say these movies are for kids and kids love it. And that was like apparently totally true, because once these kids in their 20s got to be in their 20s, they took over the internet and let us know what they thought of the prequels. And it's very different than I think what the generation that grew up with the original trilogy and then, had the prequels happen to them. It's such a different perspective that like we'll never be able to have, really.
Yeah, I do not even know.
I guess like at least it gets better.
Yeah.
if you start with the prequels, but I don't even know if people think that. I don't even know if those fans think that.
Yeah, I don't know. My son, he's watched all but just a few of the movies now at this point, and I started with Phantom Menace because I'm like, this is like the most kid-friendly movie. And he wanted to watch them in order, but he also wanted to see Darth Vader. And he's like, can we watch one with Darth Vader now? And I'm like, yeah, let's do that, because Attack of the Clones, I don't want you like just like watching that. And Revenge of the Sith is still kind of intense in parts. So I'm like, let's just skip straight to A New Hope.
Sure.
So now like he's seen The Force Awakens, and he started. I showed him the first episode of Clone Wars, and he got really into that.
Cool.
The one with Yoda and the battle droids, and he's like, oh, can we keep watching that? And he's interested. He's seen he's got a book with General Grievous in it, and he's like, are we going to see this guy? And I'm like, yeah. So he's really interested in it now at this point. Just
to be excited
series.
by the idea of General Grievous and not just puzzled about his appearance in a film.
Yeah.
What a wonderful perspective. That's great. That's great. And it's there's no right way to be a Star Wars fan. So whatever.
No, and that's what I was thinking of. I'm like, I feel like you put so much pressure on the correct way of watching it. He told me tonight. He's like, because we went to go see the Sonic movie, and after that, he's like, can my birthday party be Sonic this year? And I'm like, we'll see how long this phase lasts. And he just literally told me tonight. He's like, I know I said Sonic before, but I think he was looking at this Clone Wars book with General Grievous, and he's like, I think I want to do Star Wars instead. And I was just thinking about that, about the way that Star Wars inspired my imagination as a kid is very different than kids with all this content now.
Yeah, totally.
So, because I'm just do you even realize? I don't know if he really even realizes the era that the show takes place in, So
sure. I mean, remind me how old Harrison is?
6.
He's 6, right? So it was probably about that same time that I first saw Star Wars. Maybe I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom was. I was talking about this with my mom recently. I don't remember why, but we'd go into, this is the era where drugstores just had a video rental section.
Oh yeah.
Right. So we'd rent videos from Farmore, which is a drugstore, and I would rent these trashy comedies. I was watching Police Academy 4 on TNT, but they weren't running Police Academy, so I wanted to rent Police Academy, and I'd rent the Bill and Ted movies and stuff.
Excellent.
And my mom doesn't remember what the movie was. I don't remember what the movie was, but there was some movie I wanted to rent, and she's like, you can only rent this bad movie if you watch a good movie. Here, you need to watch Star Wars if you're going to watch this. And my mom was defining Star Wars as a good movie to watch that would counteract whatever junk food movie I was trying to watch.
That's interesting.
That was the first time I saw Star Wars. I remember it very, very vaguely, and my only impression of it from that viewing was, I think, the trench fight at the end, the whole Death Star battle. And then it all spiraled out of control in the next 5 years from there.
Wow, that's interesting. My first exposure to Star Wars was, I was told that I needed to watch them because I would like them, but I was also told Empire Strikes Back is the best one. And I did not, my mind didn't I would watch, my dad introduced me to Indiana Jones, and I remember I never knew the correct order that those movies were supposed to be watched in, and they're all just these individual adventures. So I thought Star Wars was kind of like that. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to start with the best one. So the first movie I watched was Empire Strikes Back, and then Return of the Jedi. And I didn't see Star Wars until later.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, very similar. Yeah, I mean, because you wouldn't know that you need to watch them in this specific order. That's not a thing that occurs to an 8-year-old. You like me, I was used to watching Police Academy 5 is on, Police Academy 2 is on. It doesn't matter. They're all just Police Academy movies.
Yeah.
Similar deal. Yeah. Why would you expect? Yeah, I still remember how excited I was Christmas of 1995 getting the Faces box set. It was the last present I opened.
Oh, yeah.
I opened everything that I thought... I used to have them there. That's great. I have my set in Pittsburgh still. I remember I wrote a paper about this in grade school too, or just what we did over Christmas break or winter break or whatever it was. I wrote about my Star Wars tapes. But I remember I opened every other present, and because I was trying to open them based on what I thought might be a set of VHS tapes, and turns out I was a very bad judge of what 3 VHS tapes were shaped like. because it was the last thing I opened. But yeah, it was great. It was great. I watched the heck out of those tapes.
With the old Leonard Maltin having the interviews beforehand.
That's right. Those did have those Maltin interviews beforehand.
Yeah, part of like Star Wars, like my memory of watching Star Wars as a child is watching the Leonard Maltin interviews with George Lucas beforehand every time.
Hello, I'm Leonard Maltin. Star Wars may have started out as a mere movie, but it became a phenomenon. It changed the way movies were made and perceived and marketed. It ushered in a new era of science fiction and fantasy and developed a whole new vocabulary of visual special effects. And the man who created the film, who imagined it, and then realized it, is here with us today to share some of his memories. George Lucas.
You know, this is a huge divergence for what we're talking about.
It is.
Did I tell you about the time I met Leonard Maltin a couple years ago?
Oh, no.
So you may remember I posted a picture on Facebook of the year that I worked at the Oscars. It was the year that that La La Land accidentally won Best Picture instead of Moonlight. I was working in the press room, and I had two responsibilities depending on like just where I was in the shift. I was either holding a microphone that I would bring to whatever journalist was asking a question, like whatever journalist was called, I would bring them the microphone so they could ask their question. My other responsibility was I would hand out little personal radios that had a closed circuit broadcast of the show so that journalists could pop a headphone in their ear if they needed to strictly hear what was going on because of all the chatter in the room. And to get that, you need to give up a credential. Like usually, like you leave your driver's license, you take the radio, and then when you come, you trade back.
Makes sense.
So one of the people that I got to serve during that experience was Leonard Maltin, which I didn't expect to like affect me so much, but it really did, because like I realized that Leonard Maltin taught me how to read film critics as a kid. Because as a kid, I didn't have the internet in my house until like the late 90s, and so my family's reference guide for movies was Leonard Maltin's movie guide. We bought like the new edition every other year, pretty much. Maybe we bought them annually. I don't remember, but I referenced that thing all the time. And I often would not agree with his reviews. Like, again, for example, like I'll talk about Bill and Ted. He gave each of the Bill and Ted movies like 2 or 2.5 stars or something. And it's just like, I do not agree with that. But you read the reviews and you learn, oh, these are the kinds of things he doesn't like. And if he mentions those things, that might be an indication that you might like that thing.
Yeah.
You know, like once you learn how to read a film critic, even if you don't agree with what they're saying, you know their taste enough to kind of base what you might think off of what they write.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I learned that from Maltin. And I didn't even realize that until I started thinking about why was it so affecting to me to, like, shake Leonard Maltin's hand. He was super nice. And I actually had a really nice chat with his daughter.
Yeah, him and his daughter are very close.
Yeah, they do a podcast, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
And I had a really nice chat with her, and I told her all this gushy stuff that I wouldn't tell Leonard Maltin to his face. But yeah, that was a nice moment, and I did totally forget that he'd had those intros on the Star Wars tapes.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw that book you're talking about. I was like, oh, this is the guy that talks to George Lucas.
Yeah, and like to me as a kid, like it's just like whoever is talking about movies, if you're not like Siskel, Ebert, or Leonard Maltin, like why am I even listening to you?
Yeah,
like, that was my entire conception of people who like had opinions on films as I was growing up.
If you don't have a cameo in Gremlins 2: The New Batch, why?
Why are you even commenting on film?
Now, I know some people found this movie fun, but me, I'd rather spend 2 hours having root canal work done. What's fun about a movie full of ugly, slimy, mean-spirited, gloppy little monsters who run amok and attack innocent people? Our moviegoers so desperate for entertainment that this kind of trash and cast for fun. Whoa, wait a minute! I was just kidding! Ow!
Which I guess he, after that, he decided he did not want to be a cameo in any more films because then he ran into the dilemma of he did not quite like the movie. He's like, but I'm in it, so...
How bummery that he didn't get on board with Gremlins 2. I mean, like, I kind of get it, but like, man, what a great film that movie is.
Oh,
I love Gremlins 2.
Yeah, I love it.
Love Gremlins 2 so much.
But anyway, Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
But this episode of the Clone Wars was pretty good.
It was. Well, speaking of people watching it for the first time, you had mentioned before we started recording that you had watched it with a friend who'd never seen.
Yeah, so you texted me earlier today, and I realized that I had slacked my responsibilities and had not yet watched Clone Wars. I was hanging out with a friend of mine out at his place in Pasadena, and he's like, well, we could watch it here. And I'm like, have you ever watched Clone Wars? He's like, no. I mean, he's a Star Wars fan. He's just never watched Clone Wars. So he was up for doing that, and I just was like, we should at least go back and watch The Bad Batch so you have some context for like what the heck is going on.
Makes sense.
And at least during that, like, he can ask me, like, in an episode I've seen before, he can ask me, like, well, what's X and what's Y and why is this happening? And get that stuff out of the way before the episode that I need to actually concentrate on. But he liked it a lot. He got very into the super tropey Bad Batch character archetypes. He really liked the, like, advantageous mutations angle. He really liked the accidental super soldiers. He was very into the Anakin stuff in the second episode. Yeah, he had a very overall, like, strongly positive experience with the Clone Wars for the first time, just watching the first 2 episodes of season 7.
Oh, that's awesome.
I suppose isn't, like, the worst time to step in. They're like, you know, if you can just, like, say, like, oh yeah, the most important clones we care about are Rex and Cody. These are them. You recognize everybody else. They're fighting some space wars. You know, that's all you really need to go into at least the Bad Batch, you know?
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, things could be further enriched. Like, obviously it's about things that we're already familiar with in a lot of ways. But to an outsider who's just taken it in for the first time, he got into the action. He liked the scenes a lot. So, yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. Just, like, no real conception of what the show was or what it did, and just got into it pretty immediately, and that was a pretty fun thing to watch.
Awesome. And that's cool, the Anakin stuff, because that's something I wanted to bring up to you as well, is like, and especially for him, because him, like, the Anakin he knows is the Hayden Christensen Anakin. And to me, when I think of Anakin, I think of Clone Wars Anakin, because they did like a, you know, such a dramatic turn on the character and how they wanted to portray him. Because like with Obi-Wan, they got James Arnold Taylor to just do your Ewan McGregor and just try to emulate Ewan McGregor as much as possible. But when they cast,
and he does that very well.
Yeah, and when they cast and got Anakin, Matt Lanter, they were very much, they gave him a different kind of direction. They didn't tell him who he was, the character or the show that he was going to be a part of. So they were like really trying to like form a different character, and they didn't want him to have preconceived notions of the character. But I really like Clone Wars Anakin a lot. You know, he's definitely more in line to like what you would hope, like Luke's dad to be.
It's a more subtle and nuanced depiction of the character, which is unfortunate that it's relegated to a thing that a lot of people who've seen the movie will not watch. And it's also like, you know, that's been one of my main things with the series overall is like, not that it does that with Anakin, because it does a very good job of what it does with Anakin's character, but just because that character is so disparate from the movies. Yeah. It remains hard for me to like reconcile those two things. And then, you know, I just have to like take a step back in like some meta lens and just be like, well, and you know, in the universe of Star Wars, where there's like multiple narrators just telling the story that occurred like thousands of years ago, perhaps like the telling and blah, 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 you know, like you can do that till the cows come home and just justify it to yourself. That's kind of what I have to do.
Yeah. Or Topher Grace can hire Matt Lanter to redub all of Anakin's lines in the movie.
That would be good.
That'd be
I would
really
like
interesting.
That would be bizarre. I mean, like, I don't know, but there's But that's the thing too. Like, it's also in the writing. If you can get me an actor that can deliver a good and solid line read of the sand monologue, then like I don't know what I'll do, but I will be shocked. I don't know what my response would be other than shock. But like, you know, you just when you take that kind of absurdity out of the writing, you gain a lot in the character as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because a lot of the issues with those movies are, like you said, the writing and the directing.
Yeah. It's like, it's not necessarily what the stories are. It's literally just how they were portrayed. It's like if Lucas wrote the treatment and then handed it off to people that would shape it into a more dramatic and impactful thing, that would have been nice, but we didn't get that. Because the broad strokes are interesting, and I think the broad strokes are very strong. But the execution, for me, leaves amounts to be desired.
Yeah, it would have been really interesting if he had stuck with his original plan of kind of like what he did with the original trilogy and saying, I'm just going to kind of write, like you said, the outline and have somebody else polish it up and then have a different director do it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's not like, yeah, but, and it was at a time when, like, you know, this culture of like a creative circle and like a writer's room and like this thing is a more recent creative phenomenon, at least in terms of like movie making over TV making. But I mean, Star Wars would have greatly benefited from that approach in the prequel era when George was driving the ship. Like if like, I think it would have actually probably been really great if we had like a Disney style Star Wars, like writer's brain trust, writer's room coming up with, or like just there to flesh out the things that come from the mothership.
Yeah.
That would have served the prequels very well, I think. But then that would have required George to relinquish an amount of creative control, which I don't think he was wanting to do at that time. So yeah, or creative something. I don't know, man. I'm not George Lucas. I can't speak to anything.
Yeah, and he's so much of a person that, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he collaborated well with Filoni on this series.
Yeah.
And how that writer's room worked, I don't know. But
oh, and following up on a thing from last week, I did take a closer watch at that Star Wars Underworld stuff.
Yeah.
That footage that made its way online. For the fact that was shot in like 2010 and intended for TV, it's like actually stunning. Like how, just that it looks good at all in a technical way.
Yeah, especially when you see the behind the scenes green screen footage afterwards, and you're like,
yeah, where there's like really nothing. It's like, it's very impressive for the time that was made. Like, just, you know, which is like under 10 years ago, but like for the time that was made, that was very impressive for that time. But like the aesthetic of the cinematography was just so wrong.
No,
so
I
wrong.
could not. I went back and looked at it a little bit more myself, and I was like, this is so
like
hideous.
the handheld camera work and the frame rate, that was not good. Which I understand, like, that's not necessarily how the show would have been, and I'm not, like, commenting on, like, it's good that it didn't happen because it would have looked like garbage. Because, like, on a technical level, it probably would have looked amazing. But if it was that camera work, it would have been like, this is, I don't know why. It looked like they remember the fan film Troops? Remember Troops? Looked like Troops with a budget.
Yeah, that is what it looked like.
Which is not like a good look for a Star Wars TV show.
I remember being so impressed by Troops in the 90s, because you're like,
the best.
What is this?
Yeah, you're like, how did they get stormtrooper suits?
Yeah, that's how did they do any of this?
Yeah, like Star Wars fan films that looked good. Like there is a period of Star Wars fan films from like, it's like 1997-ish through like early 2000s, like before the tech made it, like before tech was in a way that made it easier to make low budget stuff look kind of impressive. Yeah, there was a Mara Jade one too called Dark Redemption that I remember buying a bootleg tape of at the convention. That's not amazing, but like on a production level, pretty dang good. It's fun to see Mara Jade doing some stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. Cool. But
cool.
Yeah, we can go ahead and wrap it up there. And
cool.
Looking forward to next week. Next week we'll be discussing season 7, episode 3, On the Wings of Kiridax, which I thought we were already doing.
We're gonna be. I guess maybe the Kiridax. Kiridax?
Yeah, Kiridax.
Kiridax?
Yeah, with a K.
They probably help them to escape from the planet that Echo is on. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll actually really enjoy watching. I'm hoping clone troopers ride the flying lizards. I hope that happens.
Oh, I'm pretty sure they do.
Because I'll be into that. They remind me of the. What are they called? It's on Onderon and the Tales from the Jedi comic books. If you know what I'm talking about from like the old extent. It's like ancient Jedi, ancient Jedi stuff.
I've not read that, but
that was really interesting ancient Jedi stuff. I always really liked the Tales of the Jedi comic books. Yeah, there's a planet that the Jedi, they would have been called Padawans had that term existed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have to go deal with this thing on this planet called Onderon, and there's like these warring factions of people on Onderon.
I was gonna say Onderon has definitely
Onderon is a planet in Clone Wars.
Yeah,
actually.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I was actually super thrilled when that stuff got like canonized in Clone Wars. It means Ulic Qel-Droma and like these Jedi characters, and like Norin Rad was this like Sith, this big Sith baddie. They probably don't exist anymore. I like that. Very cool name too. But yeah, those are good reads if you wanted to just like imagine some Star Wars legendy stuff and read some stuff that isn't canon anymore.
Yeah. I was gonna say Onderon. Yeah, that's the planet they introduced Saw Gerrera in. So.
Yeah, that's right. Saw Gerrera is on Onderon. So, yeah, I like that planet, and the flying lizards on Skeko remind me of the flying beasts of Onderon.
Nice.
Which I guess probably were in Clone Wars also. Now that I'm thinking of it, yeah, they were.
So yeah, next week we'll be covering that. Looking forward to seeing that and seeing how this arc continues to go.
Yeah, me too.
All right, and in the meantime, Alex, where can people find you?
On Twitter and Instagram at Alex Brunelle, Brunelle. Oh yeah, I'm also probably in text that accompanies this podcast.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Definitely take a look at the show notes. And you can find me at Travis Fishburne on Twitter. You can also find the show on Twitter as at Who Watches Pod. You can reach the show at whowatchespodcast@gmail.com. We are on Facebook and Instagram. We also post every episode on YouTube as well. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. The reviews are greatly appreciated. And until next week, begun. The end of the Clone Wars has.
Nice. Thanks, everybody.
What would it take to persuade you to go back onto a soundstage and direct a film yourself?
Well, I'd like to direct again. I mean, I'm very interested and still in directing, and there is a possibility I may direct one of the next Star Wars. If I do direct again, it'll be the first one, so that I can set the stage and how everything works for the other directors to follow.
But as we approach the millennium, we can look forward to the prequel trilogy.
Definitely.